People rarely admit the truth. Not to others, not even to themselves. The truth that weakness doesn't appear suddenly. It leaks in slowly, quietly, like a dimming of the inner flame you didn't realize you were relying on. One choice at a time, one compromise at a time, one surrendered impulse at a time. And before you know it, you're no longer steering your life. Your impulses are. Your fears are. Your desires are. Everything you swore you had under control is now the thing pulling you by the throat. Nietzsche warned us about this long before modern psychology ever caught up. He called it the spirit's decay, a collapse of internal strength. Not physical, not intellectual, but moral, psychological, spiritual. The slow erosion of the will, the part of you that once stood firm, now dissolving into something soft, reactive, unstable. You start to feel it in subtle ways. You say yes when you wanted to say no. You stay silent when every part of you wanted to speak. You tolerate what drains you. You hide what matters. You let comfort seduce you. You let fear guide you. And every time you walk away from your own inner authority, something inside you shrinks. You feel it, don't you? That strange heaviness after betraying yourself. That dull ache behind your ribs after letting temptation win. That hollow sensation after doing something you knew was beneath your potential, beneath your standards, beneath your truth. It's not guilt, it's collapse. And it terrifies you because you can sense it. The quiet recognition that you are drifting away from who you were meant to become. You watch yourself break promises you made to yourself. You watch your discipline melt into excuses. You watch your intentions drown under distraction. You watch your strength erode under comfort. You watch your clarity vanish under chaos. And yet no one around you notices, because collapse doesn't make noise. Decay doesn't scream. Weakening doesn't announce itself. It happens silently, internally, until you wake up one day unable to recognize the person staring back at you. But here's the part Nietzsche understood better than anyone. Weakness is not the opposite of strength. Weakness is strength surrendered. It's not that you lack power, it's that you stopped claiming it. You stopped holding it. You handed it away in pieces to impulses, to habits, to people, to fears, to comforts. And the terrifying question becomes, how much of yourself have you already given away? How much of your life is ruled by instinct instead of intention? By desire instead of discipline? By comfort instead of courage? By fear instead of will? You feel this truth pressing against your mind. You know you've lost control of some part of yourself. You know something inside you is slipping. You know you're not as strong as you pretend to be. You know the collapse is happening, even if you hide it well. The real question is not whether you're weak. The real question is whether you're finally ready to confront the part of yourself that keeps choosing the path of least resistance. Because your life is being shaped by those choices. Every silent surrender, every ignored instinct, every moment you abandon your own authority. And if you don't face it, it will consume you. Stay here with me, because what comes next will show you exactly why your self-control is collapsing, and how Nietzsche believed this collapse is not the end, but the beginning of a very different kind of awakening. Before we continue, Don't forget to subscribe to Soulless so you don't miss the scripts that speak the truths you've been avoiding your entire life. The slow erosion of inner authority. You feel the shift before you can explain it. A small tug inside you, a subtle loosening of something that once held you steady. It starts quietly, almost imperceptibly, like the dimming of a light you didn't think could fade. But it does. It always does. Long before you realize what's happening, your inner authority begins to weaken. Not because you chose to be weak, not because you wanted to lose control, but because life has a way of wearing you down in the softest, most invisible ways. It begins in moments that seem harmless, moments when you let yourself slide, moments when you compromise what you know is right for what feels easier in the moment, moments when discipline whispers one thing, but desire screams another, and you listen to the louder voice. You tell yourself it's nothing, a small exception, a harmless deviation, just this once. But just this once is a seed that grows into a pattern before you even notice its roots. You start negotiating with yourself, telling yourself stories that soften the guilt. It doesn't matter. I'll fix it tomorrow. It's not that serious. I deserve a break. Each excuse becomes a brick in the foundation of your own weakening. Nietzsche warned that the real danger in life is not sudden destruction, but gradual decay. The slow, almost invisible corrosion of a once powerful will. And that's exactly what happens to you when you stop respecting your own boundaries. Every time you choose comfort over commitment, your will weakens. Every time you choose impulse over intention, your authority fades. Every time you choose fear over courage, your spirit shrinks. And you can feel the shrinking. You can feel the collapse beginning. You notice it in the way you speak to yourself, the way you hesitate, the way you doubt your ability to follow through, the way you start fearing your own promises, because somewhere deep down, you already know you won't keep them. You weren't always like this. There was a version of you who stood straighter, who trusted their decisions, who carried a sharper focus, who didn't fold under the weight of their emotions. That version of you still lives inside you, but they are buried beneath layers of compromise. The collapse of self-control never feels like a dramatic fall. It feels like forgetting. Forgetting what you stand for. Forgetting what matters. Forgetting what you promised yourself. Forgetting the standards you once lived by. And the forgetting becomes dangerous because it feels so normal. You don't even realize that you've started to fear discipline. You don't notice when your patience thins. You don't catch the moment when your convictions become negotiable. All you know is that you are no longer the one steering your life. Your emotions steer you. Your impulses steer you. Your fears steer you. Your cravings steer you. Your weakness steers you. And you watch, helpless, as your willpower slips from your hands like sand through fingers. Nietzsche believed that a collapsing will is not just a personal failing, it is a spiritual tragedy. Because when your inner authority dies, you become a prisoner to everything outside you. A prisoner to distraction. A prisoner to addiction. A prisoner to validation. A prisoner to fear. A prisoner to the opinions of others. A prisoner to your lesser instincts. You stop acting. You start reacting. You stop choosing. You start drifting. You stop leading yourself. You start being led by everything else. And something in you knows it. Something in you feels the humiliation of it. The shame of knowing you are not fulfilling the potential you sense inside you. The pain of knowing you have become a diluted version of yourself. You lie in bed at night and whisper to the dark, "What happened to me? What happened to the strength I used to feel? What happened to the fire I once carried? What happened to the version of me who didn't flinch at challenges, who didn't crumble under pressure, who didn't break promises? The truth is simple, painful, and undeniable. You betrayed yourself. Not all at once, not dramatically, but in small, consistent ways that eventually shaped the person you are now. You abandoned your own authority until you forgot how it felt to have any. And the worst part is this: no one else sees the collapse. You still function. You still smile. You still talk about your goals. You still pretend you're fine. But deep inside, you feel the fracture. You feel the instability. You feel the lack of power. The collapse of self-control is the collapse of self-respect. Because how can you respect yourself when you cannot even command yourself? How can you trust yourself when you keep breaking your own agreements? How can you love yourself when you keep abandoning the version of you who needed discipline, needed boundaries, needed protection, needed direction? You know this truth already. Your life cannot exceed the strength of your will. Your relationships, your goals, your habits, your future, your identity, all of it depends on your ability to govern yourself. And right now, that governance is failing. You feel the drift pulling. You feel the weakness settling in. You feel your inner world becoming heavier, messier, less controlled with each passing day. You don't need motivation. You don't need positivity. You don't need someone to tell you everything will be okay. What you need is to face the collapse, to stand before the weakening of your own will without flinching, to stop pretending you haven't lost control. Because until you face it, you cannot rebuild it. Nietzsche said, "The strongest people are not the ones who never fall, but the ones who see their weakness clearly and still choose to rise above it." And right now, you're standing at that exact crossroads. One direction leads deeper into decay, the slow, quiet death of the person you were meant to become. The other direction leads into the fire, into the confrontation you've avoided, into the discipline you abandoned, into the strength you forgot you had. This is where your real story begins. Not in perfection, not in power, but in the raw honesty of admitting you've fallen and choosing, finally, to get back up. The moment your will starts fighting back. You can feel the turning point long before you admit it. A quiet tension, a subtle pressure building beneath your ribs, a restless, almost primal urge that tells you something inside you is done. Done collapsing, done surrendering, done drifting through life without a center. It begins as discomfort, not the kind you can ignore, but the kind that follows you everywhere. Into your mornings, into your thoughts, into your relationships, into the mirror. It's the discomfort of knowing you've become too small for yourself, and that realization hits harder than any failure. You start noticing how tired you are of your own excuses, tired of watching yourself repeat the same cycles, tired of giving in to impulses that don't even satisfy you anymore. Tired of pretending you don't know where the problem lies. You know. Deep down, you've always known. Your life didn't fall apart because the world was unfair. It fell apart because you stopped holding yourself together. And now your will, your forgotten, buried, bruised will, starts pushing back. It doesn't roar. It doesn't scream. It doesn't demand. It rises gently, powerfully, like something ancient remembering itself. You feel it in the moments when your impulses urge you to repeat a familiar mistake, and something inside you whispers, "No, not this time." You feel it when your mind reaches for the easy path, and something deeper whispers, "Do what you said you would do." You feel it when your weakness tries to convince you you're helpless, and a spark inside you replies with quiet certainty, "I am not done yet." This is the rebirth of your will. The moment Nietzsche believed was the real beginning of strength, not the absence of weakness, but the refusal to let weakness define you. You start recognizing that. Self-control is not a battle against temptation. It's a battle for your identity. And that battle begins long before any visible change appears. It begins internally, in the small confrontations you have with yourself, the ones no one sees, the ones that determine the shape of your future. The world celebrates dramatic transformations, but Nietzsche knew better. He understood that the real transformation happens in tiny, painful decisions made alone. Like choosing to stay disciplined when no one is watching. Like refusing to betray yourself even when it would be easier. Like holding your boundaries even when your emotions beg you to abandon them. Like saying no when your impulses scream yes. Like walking away from comfort that keeps you weak. Self-control is not an act. It's a reconstruction. And the first brick of that reconstruction is always honesty. You start telling yourself the truth you've avoided for years. You admit that you wasted time. You admit that you let fear dictate your choices. You admit that you avoided responsibility. You admit that you numbed your pain with distractions. You admit that you settled for less than your potential. You admit that your weakness became a habit. You admit that you broke your own trust. This honesty burns. It feels like standing naked in front of your own soul. It feels like being exposed to a truth you spent years trying not to see. But the burn is necessary. It is the first purification, the first cleansing, the first cut into the disease that has eaten your will. Nietzsche often spoke about the idea of confronting your own abyss, that terrifying inner darkness where your fears, addictions, impulses, traumas, and desires all merge into one unstable mass. When your will begins fighting back, you feel yourself standing at the edge of that abyss. You can't look away anymore. You can't pretend it's something external. You can't blame circumstances or people or fate. The abyss is you. And the part of you that has collapsed is the part that must be rebuilt. This realization hits you in moments of silence, moments when the distractions fade and the truth becomes loud enough to hear. You start noticing how much of your life has been shaped by avoidance, how much strength you lost because you ran from discomfort, how many opportunities you missed because you feared failure, how many personal standards you abandoned because you preferred ease over effort. And suddenly, you're confronted with a new kind of fear. Not fear of the world, not fear of judgment, not fear of failure. A fear of who you are becoming if you don't stop this collapse. That fear becomes fuel, a wake-up call, a jolt, a psychological slap that shakes something dormant inside you. You start wanting more. Not more success, not more attention, not more pleasure, not more validation. You want more control. Over your habits, over your emotions, over your desires, over your impulses, over your life. Control is dignity. Control is self-respect. Control is self-ownership. Control is the root of every transformation. And even though your strength is still small, still fragile, still flickering, you can feel it growing. You start doing small things that rebuild your will like a muscle. You wake up earlier than your comfort wants you to. You push through tasks you used to abandon half-finished. You keep promises to yourself, even when no one will know. You silence impulses instead of obeying them. You endure discomfort instead of escaping it. You stop negotiating with your weakness. You start holding yourself accountable. At first, the resistance is overwhelming. Your mind throws tantrums. Your emotions rebel. Your impulses scream. Your cravings intensify. Your fear tries to pull you backward. But with each small victory, your will strengthens. It becomes harder for weakness to manipulate you. It becomes harder for distractions to seduce you. It becomes harder for old habits to reclaim you. It becomes harder for the past version of yourself to drag you back into collapse. You begin feeling a strange, powerful shift, like a weight inside you turning from liquid to stone. Like your spine remembering how to straighten, like your inner world becoming solid again. This is the moment your will starts walking out of the grave you buried it in, and the world around you begins to sense the change even before you speak it. Your posture becomes different. Your silence becomes different. Your presence becomes different. Your energy becomes different. You are no longer someone who has surrendered. You are someone who is rising. Not dramatically, not loudly, not perfectly, but undeniably. Nietzsche believed that the greatest transformation in a human life is not becoming powerful in the world, but becoming powerful within. And that is precisely what you're beginning to experience. A rebirth from the inside out. But this rebirth has a price, a cost you can no longer avoid, a confrontation you can no longer postpone. Because the next step is the most painful of all, and the most necessary. To destroy the part of you that prefers weakness. The part of you addicted to weakness. Yes, don't want to admit it, but a small, hidden part of you loves the very weakness you claim to hate. It's the part that clings to comfort, craves ease, and seeks the path that demands nothing from you. The part that whispers seductive lies whenever life asks you for discipline. You hear it every time you make a promise to yourself, the quiet voice offering escape. Do it tomorrow. You're tired. It's too much. No one will know. It doesn't matter. You can try again later. You know this voice well. It's the voice that has shaped more of your life than you want to admit. The voice that has guided too many of your decisions. The voice that has turned your potential into hesitation, your strength into avoidance, your discipline into dust. Nietzsche believed that inside every human being lives a part that secretly desires weakness. Not because weakness is pleasurable, but because it is familiar, comfortable, predictable, safe. Weakness becomes a habit long before it becomes a downfall. And habits, even destructive ones, become identities. You start identifying with a version of yourself who avoids effort. You start calling it your nature. You start saying things like, "I've always been like this. I'm not disciplined. I get overwhelmed easily. I can't help it. I'm just not that motivated." None of that is true. You weren't born weak. You learned to be. You learned to seek comfort. You learned to run from discomfort. You learned to distract yourself when things got hard. You learned to avoid challenges that exposed your limits. You learned to settle for mediocrity because excellence requires pain. And the part of you addicted to weakness is not evil. It is afraid. Afraid of responsibility. Afraid of failure. Afraid of exposure. Afraid of becoming someone you can no longer excuse. Afraid of the pressure that comes with power. Afraid of the expectations that follow strength. Weakness, by comparison, feels like a shield. A warm, soft, anesthetizing shield that protects you from having to confront who you could be. Because who you could be is terrifying. That version of you, disciplined, resolute, unshakable, would force you to abandon your old self completely. It would force you to grow, to evolve, to rise. And rising requires sacrifice. The sacrifice of excuses, comfort, victimhood, fear, self-pity. The sacrifice of the identity you've built around the idea that you're not capable of more. But here's the truth Nietzsche never softened. Growth will cost you your weakness. And some part of you is terrified of paying that price. That part clings to weakness because weakness demands nothing of you. Weakness makes no expectations. Weakness offers no responsibilities. Weakness promises comfort, even if that comfort is slowly destroying you. You think your life is shaped by your goals? No. Your life is shaped by what you're willing to suffer for. And right now, you suffer more from avoiding effort than you would from actually doing what your life requires of you. The collapse of self-control didn't happen because you lacked discipline. It happened because you nurtured weakness while neglecting strength. You fed the part of you that wants to escape. You rewarded the part of you that avoids discomfort. You obeyed the part of you that fears effort. You listened to the part of you that panics at pressure. And now, that part runs your life. It keeps you stuck in cycles you hate. It keeps you returning to habits that drain you. It keeps you in relationships that diminish you. It keeps you chasing distractions that numb you. It keeps you from becoming someone you would respect. You are not weak because you failed. You are weak because you keep choosing the easy path over the meaningful one. Weakness thrives on instant gratification. Strength thrives on delayed gratification. The difference between who you are and who you want to be exists in that single gap. Weakness chooses the short term. Strength chooses the long term. And every time you choose comfort over growth, your weakness tightens its grip around your mind. You know the feeling well. That sinking heaviness in your chest after obeying an impulse you promised you would resist. That quiet shame after breaking another commitment to yourself. That internal collapse after choosing the familiar over the necessary. That heaviness is your soul recognizing that you betrayed your own potential again. Nietzsche said that the worst suffering is the suffering that comes from self-contempt. The pain of knowing you are living beneath your potential. The humiliation of knowing you are weaker than you should be. The agony of knowing you surrendered when you could have resisted. Self-contempt is the shadow of weakness, the silent companion that follows every moment you run from yourself. You feel it even when you pretend everything is fine. You feel it in the restlessness behind your eyes, in the anxiety that rises without reason, in the irritability that comes from being unaligned, in the sadness that lingers even when your life looks okay. Weakness feels good in the moment, but it destroys you afterward. Strength feels painful in the moment, but it restores you afterward. You know this truth already. You've lived it. Every time you chose the hard path, you grew. Every time you chose the easy path, you shrank. Your life has been telling you the truth for years. You simply weren't ready to listen. But now, as your will begins to rise, slowly, stubbornly, you find yourself standing between two selves. The self who wants comfort and the self who wants meaning. Only one of them can live. And this is where Nietzsche was unforgiving. You cannot keep the part of you addicted to weakness and become strong at the same time. One must die for the other to be born. The weaker version of you, the version that collapses under pressure, that avoids responsibility, that breaks promises, that hides behind excuses, will not die quietly. It will fight. It will resist. It will tempt you with everything it has left. It will pull you back toward comfort with a force that feels like gravity. Because weakness doesn't want to lose you. You've kept it alive for years. You've fed it, protected it, believed in it, identified with it. Killing it feels like killing a part of yourself. And in a way, it is. But this is the necessary death Nietzsche spoke of. The psychological death that precedes rebirth. The death of the old self so the stronger self can emerge. This part of you, the one that clings to weakness, must be confronted, challenged, starved, and ultimately destroyed. How? Not through grand gestures, not through loud declarations, not through motivation, through discipline, through repetition, through small decisions made consistently against your weaker instinct, through discomfort willingly chosen, through the slow, painful practice of becoming someone worthy of your own respect. Strength is not an identity. It is a habit. The habit of choosing what your future needs over what your impulses want. Weakness is also a habit. The habit of choosing what feels good now over what will matter later. Your life is proof of the choices you've made so far, and your future will be the proof of the choices you make next. You are not fighting the world. You are not fighting your circumstances. You are not fighting fate. You are fighting the version of you who is terrified of growing. And the only way to win is to stop protecting that version. The collapse of self-control began the moment you nurtured your weakness. Your transformation begins the moment you stop. What comes next is the turning point. Nietzsche believed only a rare kind of person reaches: the rebirth of the will. The rebirth of the will. You thought was gone. Something shifts inside you long before it becomes visible. Not a spark, not a surge, not a lightning bolt of motivation, just a quiet, steady pressure. A tension that feels like your spirit pushing against the walls you built around it. It starts in the background of your thoughts, in the uneasy awareness that you can no longer keep living as the weaker version of yourself. At first, the shift feels like irritation. You become impatient with your own excuses. You feel disgusted with your own softness. You notice how tired you are of collapsing. You feel your patience thinning, not with others, but with yourself. It's not anger, it's awakening. Because the truth is simple. Your willpower didn't disappear. It didn't die. It didn't abandon you. It was buried, smothered by your habits, your fears, your comfort, your impulses. But buried is not gone. Buried can be unearthed, and the rebirth of your will begins the moment you stop protecting the version of yourself who has kept you small. Nietzsche believed that human beings do not suffer from a lack of strength. they suffer from a lack of direction, a lack of inner alignment, a lack of commitment to a future self they have not yet become. Your will rises the moment you decide you are no longer willing to be governed by your lower nature. You feel it first in the smallest decisions. You resist an impulse you normally obey. You delay gratification when you would normally indulge. You complete a task you would normally abandon. You endure discomfort without rushing to numb it. You keep a promise to yourself when no one is watching. It seems insignificant, but these are not small victories. They are the first breaths of a soul coming back to life. You begin noticing a shift in your thoughts. You stop thinking like someone who is defeated. Your inner dialogue changes tone. You speak to yourself differently, not softly, not indulgently, but truthfully. You tell yourself the things you used to avoid. You can do better. You are lying to yourself. You're choosing weakness again. You know what you should do. Stop escaping. Start acting. Rise. This brutal honesty is the first sign of your rebirth. Weakness thrives on self-delusion. Strength thrives on self-awareness. And you are becoming aware, painfully aware, of the life you've been throwing away. At first, the rebirth feels ugly, raw, uncomfortable, like peeling away layers of skin you grew too attached to. You feel exposed, ungrounded, unsafe. You are shedding the identity of someone who lived according to impulse rather than intention, and that shedding feels like loss. You grieve the comfort that once numbed you. You mourn the ease that once protected you. You miss the mindless indulgence you once escaped into. You feel the pull of your old habits, your old patterns, your old cravings, each one calling you back into the safety of collapse. But something in you refuses to answer the call. Something new, something ancient, something powerful. This something is your will, the force Nietzsche believed separates the weak from the ones who eventually rise above their own nature. You begin feeling it as a presence inside you, a presence that feels like a spine made of fire, a presence that straightens you internally, a presence that says, "I am done being controlled by the parts of me that fear effort." The rebirth is not linear. Some days you feel strong, focused, determined, unshakable. Other days you stumble, you break a promise, you fall back into a familiar weakness. But this time, you don't stay down. You don't surrender. You don't collapse into shame. You rise again. Not because you feel motivated, but because your identity is changing. You are no longer someone who gives up easily. You are no longer someone who negotiates with weakness. You are no longer someone who lets impulses derail your life. You are no longer someone who abandons themselves. You are becoming someone who stands back up, someone who self-corrects, someone who moves forward with bruises instead of excuses, someone who chooses the difficult path because they have finally realized the difficult path is the only one that leads anywhere meaningful. You start treating yourself with respect, not kindness, not softness, but respect. The kind of respect that says, "I expect more from you because you are capable of more." Your standards rise, your boundaries sharpen, your expectations of yourself deepen. Your tolerance for your own excuses evaporates. This is the moment Nietzsche believed your spirit becomes dangerous, because the world cannot break a person who has stopped abandoning themselves. You begin realizing something, terrifying and liberating at the same time. You are capable of dominating your impulses. You are capable of shaping your habits. You are capable of rebuilding your identity. You are capable of becoming someone your weaker self feared you might become. You begin valuing discomfort because you see what it does for you. You begin craving discipline because you feel its power returning. You begin seeking challenge because you know it sharpens you. You begin embracing difficulty because it forces the weaker parts of you to die. You stop chasing pleasure because you finally understand pleasure is the enemy of self-respect when consumed without purpose. You start craving effort because effort is the birthplace of strength. The rebirth of your will is not a glow-up, it is a war. A war against your old identity, your addictions, your excuses, your emotional impulses, your need for comfort, your instinct to run. And slowly, painfully, you begin winning. You begin waking up with clarity instead of chaos. You begin acting with intention instead of impulse. You begin thinking long-term instead of short-term. You begin trusting yourself again because you've earned your own trust. Nothing feels as powerful as being someone you can rely on. Your life begins to change. Not dramatically, not yet, but internally, you become someone who no longer bends under pressure. You stop fearing the world because you have learned to stop fearing yourself. The more your will strengthens, the more you realize that the collapse you once saw as failure was actually the doorway to rebirth. Because everything that is reborn must first die. Your weakness had to die. Your avoidance had to die. Your excuses had to die. Your lower instincts had to die. Your delusions had to die, so your will could rise. Nietzsche believed that the strongest people are not the ones who never fall, but the ones who rise again with a deeper understanding of their own darkness. Your darkness did not destroy you, it purified you. Your collapse did not break you, it revealed you. Your weakness did not define you, it awakened your strength. You are no longer the passive passenger of your life. You are becoming the driver, the architect, the author, the authority. The rebirth of your will is not a return to who you were. It is the emergence of someone you have never been before. Someone disciplined, someone intentional, someone self-governed, someone who no longer bows to impulses, someone who is becoming immune to the seduction of weakness, someone who is finally ready to face the world with a mind that refuses to collapse again. When discipline becomes your new identity. You don't notice the shift the moment it happens, not at first. It arrives slowly, like a new gravity forming inside you, quiet but undeniable. A pull toward a different version of yourself, one you've been circling for years but never fully stepped into. It begins with how you move through your days. Faint sharpening, a subtle straightening of your posture, a heaviness replaced by direction, a wandering mind replaced by intention, a fractured identity slowly stitching itself together. You start waking up differently. Not always motivated. Motivation has nothing to do with it. But aware. Aware that each morning is not a continuation of your old self, but an opportunity to prove your new identity is real. You begin doing things that the weaker version of you would never have attempted, or, if attempted, never sustained. At first, these choices feel forced, unnatural, heavy. Every disciplined action feels like dragging yourself into a life doesn't quite fit yet. But discipline isn't meant to feel natural in the beginning. Discipline is the force that reshapes you. It bends you. It carves you. It breaks the old patterns in your mind so new ones can form. Your subconscious resists, clinging to the familiar comforts that once defined you. It tries to lure you back into predictability. You don't have to do this. This can wait. No one will know. You've already done enough. But something deeper in you pushes back. Not loudly, not dramatically, just firmly. A voice that says, "No, this is who I am now." This is the moment discipline stops being an act and starts becoming your identity. You begin to see yourself differently, not as someone who tries, but as someone who does. Not as someone who hopes, but as someone who builds. Not as someone who wishes, but as someone who commits. Your actions become proof that you are no longer held hostage by the impulses that once controlled you. And nothing changes a person faster than becoming someone they can rely on. You start trusting yourself again. You start believing your own promises. You start realizing that self-respect is not something you earn from accomplishments. It's something you earn from consistency. This consistency, this persistence, this daily alignment with the stronger version of you, it becomes addictive. Not in the way pleasure is addictive. Pleasure weakens you. Discipline strengthens you. You begin craving hard things because you see what they do to your mind. You begin valuing effort because it sharpens you from the inside. You begin choosing discomfort because discomfort is where your character lives. You start noticing new sensations, ones you never had when weakness ruled your life. You feel grounded. You feel stable. You feel intentional. You feel like you are finally occupying your own body, your own choices, your own path. And with that grounding comes a new type of confidence, one you cannot fake, one you cannot buy, one you cannot borrow from external validation. It is the confidence of someone who knows they can depend on themselves in moments of pressure. Nietzsche believed the strongest human is the human who governs themselves. Not the one who commands others, not the one who dominates environments, but the one who dominates their own impulses. And that's exactly what you're becoming. You stop being seduced by shortcuts. You stop being manipulated by cravings. You stop being hypnotized by distractions. You stop being controlled by emotions that once dictated your entire life. You begin to live above your impulses, not under them. And this changes everything. Your relationship with yourself, your relationship with others, your relationship with time. You begin holding boundaries with a quiet firmness that surprises even you. You say no without guilt. You say yes without hesitation. You stop explaining yourself. You stop negotiating with people who can't meet you where you are. You stop internalizing chaos that doesn't belong to you. Your inner stability becomes your shield. People feel the difference. They sense your groundedness. Your presence shifts. Your silence shifts. Your energy shifts. You are no longer someone who bends. You are someone who stands. Discipline becomes a form of truth, the truth that you are no longer willing to betray yourself. And once you stop betraying yourself, everything in your life begins recalibrating. You notice patterns breaking. You notice clarity rising. You notice peace emerging. You notice strength taking shape in places you didn't know strength could live. You begin to crave progress more than pleasure. You begin to seek purpose more than comfort. You begin to prioritize long-term meaning over short-term relief. When discipline becomes your identity, you stop running from your life and start building it. You stop chasing approval and start chasing alignment. You stop blaming circumstances and start taking ownership. You stop fearing effort and start using effort as fuel. The paradox is simple. The more discipline you practice, the more freedom you create. Freedom from impulses, freedom from old patterns, freedom from emotional chaos, freedom from regret, freedom from self-contempt, freedom from the weaker version of you who almost destroyed your future. Your whole existence starts shifting into a new rhythm, a new internal architecture, a new identity built on strength instead of surrender. And once discipline becomes your identity, something even more profound happens. You become someone your old self would never recognize. Someone capable of walking into discomfort with a calm mind, a steady heart, and an unwavering will. But this transformation brings you to the next, far more difficult stage, the confrontation with the instincts that do not want you to evolve. Confronting the impulses that want you back. A moment comes when your old instincts begin to panic. They sense the change in you. They notice the tightening of your mind, the sharpening of your discipline, the quiet seriousness growing in your voice. They feel the shift, and they hate it. Because weakness has been living comfortably inside you for years. Your impulses have had room to roam freely, craving, indulging, consuming, guiding your decisions like invisible puppeteers. They were the ones in control. They were the rulers of your body, your emotions, your habits, your days. Now they feel the threat. Their power is slipping. Their authority is shrinking. Their comfort is dissolving. So they attack. At first, the attacks feel like subtle whispers, flickers of temptation, old desires returning like familiar ghosts. The smallest craving grows sharp again. The slightest inconvenience irritates you more than it should. Your mind suddenly seems louder, less cooperative, more chaotic. These are not signs of failure. These are signs of war. The impulses that once dominated you are fighting for their survival, and they will not go quietly. They begin with the simplest tactic, seduction. Relax, you've been doing so well. You deserve a break. One slip won't matter. You're being too hard on yourself. You can start again tomorrow. Each sentence feels comforting. Each one sounds reasonable. Each one is a straight line back to who you used to be. When seduction fails, your impulses shift to manipulation. This isn't working. You're the same person you've always been. You'll never change. This is too much. You're not strong enough. They attack your identity, attempting to shatter the new self before it becomes stable enough to survive. And when manipulation fails, your impulses turn to emotional warfare. Sudden waves of self-doubt, sudden cravings for comfort, sudden fear of change, sudden anxiety in your chest, sudden irritation with everything around you, sudden exhaustion that feels impossible to explain. This is not weakness returning. This is weakness fighting for its life. Nietzsche understood this better than anyone. He wrote that every ascent of the human spirit awakens the resistance of its lower nature. The closer you get to becoming your higher self, the more violently your lesser self tries to pull you back. You feel this war inside you now, the tension, the pressure, the inner friction. Two versions of you pulling in opposite directions, one rising, one clinging. And you stand between them, not yet fully transformed, but no longer the person you were. This is the most dangerous stage, not because you are at your weakest, but because you are at your turning point. If you push through this moment, your instincts break, your impulses submit, your lower nature loses its authority, and self-control becomes not an effort, but a state of being. If you fall in this moment, your old identity returns with twice the strength it had before. This is why transformation feels painful, because you're not just building a new self, you're killing an old one. And death does not happen quietly. Your impulses begin screaming because they are losing control. Your cravings intensify because they sense starvation. Your fear grows loud because it fears irrelevance. Your excuses multiply because they know their time is limited. You're not failing, you're winning. You're hitting the exact pressure point where transformation begins its irreversible shift. But this moment requires something your old self never had: the courage to endure inner suffering without collapsing. Because the war you are fighting is not a war against laziness or habits or procrastination. It is a war against your own instinct to run from discomfort. And every time you resist that instinct, even for a minute, your will grows stronger. You begin seeing impulses not as commands, but as suggestions, not as truths, but as noise, not as identity, but as remnants of your weaker self. You start recognizing the pattern. The moment you move toward growth, resistance spikes. The moment you try to rise, your impulses panic. The moment you move into discipline, your cravings feel unbearable. The moment you commit to your future, your past drags its claws into your mind. The pain is not a sign you're unprepared. The pain is a sign you're progressing. Because the old you is being forced into its final corner. This is where most people turn back. This is where most people retreat. This is where most people fall, not because they lack strength, but because they misinterpret resistance as failure. You are not failing. You are breaking the cycle. You are breaking the identity that once held you hostage. You are breaking the patterns that kept you small. And breaking always hurts. But beneath that pain, beneath that chaos, beneath that pressure, a new power begins to emerge. Your ability to observe your impulses rather than obey them. Your ability to sit with discomfort without escaping it. Your ability to endure inner chaos without breaking your commitments. Your ability to see through emotional manipulation coming from your own mind. This is the beginning of sovereignty, the moment Nietzsche called the birth of the higher self. The self that is not controlled by fleeting cravings, the self that is not dictated by momentary urges, the self that does not crumble under emotional waves, the self that does not abandon its long-term purpose for short-term relief. This is the version of you who can walk through inner storms without collapsing. This is the version of you who can withstand the full force of your own resistance. This is the version of you who can stand in discomfort until discomfort bows and becomes strength. The war you are fighting is not to become someone else. It is to become someone your impulses no longer control. The war you are fighting is to reclaim the authority you surrendered for years. The war you are fighting is for your future self, the one who will live the life your weaker self never could. And if you can push through this stage, if you can endure the psychological violence your lower nature throws at you, you will cross into a realm of strength most people never reach. A life where your impulses submit to your intention. A life where your discipline becomes natural. A life where your will becomes unshakable. A life where your identity becomes self-created. A life where your weakness no longer governs your days. You are closer than you think, closer than you've ever been, closer than your impulses want you to realize. One more stage remains, the stage where the war ends and your will becomes the ruler of your entire life. Becoming the one who cannot be broken. You reach a point where something inside you begins to harden, not in a cruel way, not in a cynical way, but in the way steel hardens after being through the fire. You feel the shift in your chest first, a steadiness, a weight, a calmness that doesn't feel fragile or temporary. It feels earned. It feels forged. It feels yours. You're not fully transformed yet, but you're no longer collapsing either. You are standing in a space between who you were and who you're becoming, and for the first time, you feel the ground holding you instead of swallowing you. This is the emergence of unbreakability, the final stage before the full rebirth of your will. The moment when your inner structure becomes so solid that life can push against you, but it can't break you. Not because you stop feeling pain, not because you stop having impulses, not because you stop struggling, but because you finally have a center that does not move. Nietzsche believed that true strength isn't found in perfection. True strength is the ability to withstand yourself, to stand face to face with your own chaos and say, I will not be ruled by this. And now, you are becoming that person. You notice the shift in your reactions. Things that once triggered you into spirals now simply pass through your mind like shadows moving across a wall. You see them, you acknowledge them, but you don't become them anymore. You no longer mistake a passing thought for a command. You no longer mistake a craving for a need. You no longer mistake an emotion for a truth. You have developed distance between stimulus and response, the holy space where self-control lives. And in that space, you find power you never had before. The power to choose, the power to pause, the power to resist, the power to redirect, the power to endure, the power to remain aligned with your higher self even when your lower self screams for attention. This is what unbreakability feels like. Not numbness, not indifference, but sovereignty. You start noticing that life still tests you, but differently. Not with overwhelming obstacles, but with subtle temptations designed to check whether your new identity is real or just another phase. These tests appear quietly, in the middle of your routine, in the middle of your relationships, in the middle of your cravings. Moments where the old you would have surrendered instantly, but you don't. Not anymore. You pause. You breathe. You observe. You choose. And that choice, that quiet, intentional choice, is the demolition of your former weakness. Your will begins operating without friction. The same decisions that once required massive internal debate now emerge effortlessly. You say no without guilt. You say yes without fear. You walk away from people who drain the strength you fought so hard to rebuild. You walk toward challenges that sharpen the identity you are shaping. You become deliberate, not rigid, not harsh, but unwavering. Your life begins to shift around this new internal architecture. The way you carry yourself is different. The way you listen is different. The way you speak is different. The way you choose is different. People sense it. Some respect it. Some fear it. Some resent it. But none of them can ignore it. Because a person who cannot be broken radiates a presence the world recognizes instantly. You don't need to prove anything anymore. Not to them, not to yourself, not to the weaker version of you that once begged for comfort. You've stopped romanticizing ease. You've stopped glorifying pleasure. You've stopped seeking shortcuts. You've stopped needing validation. You have become someone who understands that discipline is not punishment, it is liberation. Because the more disciplined you become, the more freedom you feel. Freedom from your past, freedom from your patterns, freedom from your impulses, freedom from the chaos inside you, freedom from the identity that once kept you stuck. You begin moving through the world with a kind of quiet confidence that doesn't need to announce itself. It's in the stillness of your gaze, the steadiness of your posture, the clarity of your decisions, the solidity of your standards. And as your identity strengthens, your environment begins to shift as well. You stop tolerating conversations that lower your consciousness. You stop investing energy into people who remain addicted to their weakness. You stop participating in dynamics that drain your discipline. You stop giving attention to anything that does not align with your growth. Your world becomes smaller, not by limitation, but by refinement. Only the essential remains. Only the meaningful stays. Only the purposeful enters. The rest dissolves, not through force, but through evolution. Weakness is no longer compatible with you. Chaos is no longer familiar. Self-betrayal is no longer an option. You have grown into someone who does not collapse under pressure, someone who uses pressure as a tool to forge deeper strength. You have become someone whose identity is not determined by moods, impulses, fear, or external influence. You have become someone who can walk alone without breaking. And that's the moment Nietzsche believed a new kind of human emerges. A person not shaped by their environment, but a person who shapes themselves from the inside out. A person whose strength is not dependent on circumstance. A person whose discipline is not dependent on motivation. A person whose self-control is not dependent on mood. A person whose identity is not dependent on validation. A person who is, in the deepest sense, unbreakable. You have not reached perfection. You have reached sovereignty. And sovereignty is what your spirit has been chasing all along. But now comes the final stage, the transformation that binds everything together. The moment your new identity becomes permanent, the moment the collapse turns into creation, the moment your weakness becomes wisdom. The reforging of a self that will never collapse again. You wake up one day and realize something has changed. Not in the world, not in your circumstances, but in the architecture of your inner life. A quiet structure has formed inside you, a foundation, a solidity, a pulse of direction where confusion once lived, a rhythm of intention where chaos once roamed freely. It doesn't feel like a burst of motivation. It doesn't feel like confidence. It doesn't feel like triumph. It feels like recognition. A deep, grounded recognition that you are not the person you used to be. The collapse that once swallowed you has become the soil for your rebirth. You aren't fighting for control anymore. You are control. Not because you force yourself, not because you micromanage every thought, not because you punish yourself into discipline, but because your identity has shifted into someone who doesn't negotiate with weakness. And that identity, that unshakable internal structure, is what Nietzsche spent his life trying to describe. A human who is self-governed, self-created, self-directed, self-forged. A human who does not need external systems to tell them who they are. A human who has walked through their own abyss and returned with fire in their hands. That's you now. Not entirely finished, but undeniably transformed. You remember the version of yourself who collapsed easily, the one whose impulses dragged them through days like a puppet, the one who broke under the slightest pressure, the one who begged for comfort, the one who avoided effort, the one who couldn't trust their own promises, the one who woke up already defeated. You remember that version with sadness, but not shame, because you understand now that collapse was the beginning, the necessary destruction before you could rebuild. The death of the old self was not punishment, it was preparation. Your collapse was the universe breaking the weak parts of you so the strong parts could finally emerge. Now you move differently. You make decisions with clarity instead of panic. You hold yourself with firmness instead of apology. You walk with presence instead of fear. You speak with intention instead of impulse. You live with structure instead of chaos. There is a silence in you now, not emptiness, not numbness, but authority, and the world around you senses it. Some people are drawn to it. Some are intimidated by it. Some misunderstand it, but none of them can deny it. You have become someone who governs their own life from the inside out. You have learned what most people never do. Self-control is not about suppressing who you are. Self-control is about becoming who you are meant to be. Your impulses no longer define your identity. Your cravings no longer shape your days. Your emotions no longer overpower your purpose. Your fears no longer dictate your future. You are free. Not in the shallow way society defines freedom, but in the profound psychological sense that Nietzsche fought to articulate. The freedom of someone who is stronger than their own weakness. Freedom from self-betrayal. Freedom from emotional slavery. Freedom from the habits that once held you captive. Freedom from the inner chaos that destroyed your potential. Freedom from the cravings that made you small. Freedom from the past version of yourself who almost ruined the life you are finally ready to live. This freedom isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need applause. It settles in quietly, like a second heartbeat. You don't wake up hoping for strength. You wake up already standing in it. You don't keep promises to yourself to feel worthy. You keep promises because the person you are now doesn't break them. You don't choose discipline to escape guilt. You choose discipline because it's the only language your new identity speaks. You don't avoid comfort because it scares you. You avoid comfort because it weakens you. You don't fear the abyss anymore. You've already walked through it. You've already met the parts of yourself that wanted to destroy you. You've already faced the urges that once ruled your life. And now, those urges bow to you. This is strength. Not force, not aggression, not dominance, but self-possession. The world has taught you to fear discipline as if it's a prison. It isn't. Your impulses were the prison. Your lack of control was the prison. Your self-betrayal was the prison. Discipline was the key. And now you hold that key, not in your hand, but in your identity. You no longer have to try to be strong. You simply are. Because strength has become your default, your instinct, your nature. Your old self, the one addicted to weakness, has nothing left to cling to. There is no softness to hide in, no excuse to escape through, no internal chaos left to surrender to. You have outgrown the person who once lived their life on their knees. You stand now, fully, completely, not perfectly, but unbroken. And this transformation will shape everything that comes next. Your relationships. You will no longer tolerate anyone who benefits from your weakness. Your habits. You will no longer feed behaviors that drain your strength. Your goals. You will no longer settle for paths that insult your potential. Your future. You will no longer let your impulses decide what becomes of you. The collapse you thought would end you has, instead, redefined you. And the question that remains now is not whether you will rise. You already have. The real question is this. Now that you have tasted your own strength, what part of your life are you finally ready to rebuild with the power you never believed you had?